Find out what inspires the creative imagination with John Wilson. This cultural life.
You can't get anywhere else.
Player.
Any kind of weather problems that you can imagine, we got them here. We have earthquakes, we have tsunami.
Let's hope we have none of those things today, right?
A lot of black people think they cannot go to the water for surfing, and they can do. Everybody can surf. Everybody can do. Everybody can surf.
Inspiring travel on the BBC.
Live from London, this is BBC News. The Israeli military says it's carried out a targeted raid, sending tanks into Gaza to prepare for future operations.
We did engage, we did kill the enemy, and also seek out lookout positions that Hamas are still holding in the area, potentially evacuating and clearing mines and explosive devices.
The UN has begun to significantly scale down its operations in Gaza because fuel has almost run out.
We have no rescue teams. People are still alive and shouting. We need humanitarian en masse from all directions to elevate this unprecedented human suffering.
And a major manhunt is underway in the US state of Maine, where police are searching for a gunman who has killed at least 16 people. Hello, I'm Lucy Hockings. Welcome to BBC News Now. 3 hours of fast-moving news, interviews and reaction. The Israeli military says it's carried out a significant incursion into the Gaza Strip to attack Hamas positions. It's released this video and it shows, as you can see, tanks and armoured bulldozers crossing the perimeter fence. An Israeli Defence Forces spokesperson told the BBC soldiers carried out the tactical raid towards central Gaza to, in his words, prepare the battlefield for future operations. The Israeli military says the number of people confirmed to be held hostage in Gaza has now risen to 224, and he has warned that number could rise. So far, 4 hostages are known to have been released. Meanwhile, UN aid workers say they've begun to significantly scale down their operations in Gaza. Fuel reserves have almost run out. Israel says Hamas is storing enough fuel to run hospitals and water pumps for many days, but is keeping it for its war-fighting capabilities. We have live pictures of Gaza at the moment, and later in the programme we're going to be talking to our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette. She's in Jerusalem. Our World Affairs editor, John Simpson, will join us from Beirut. We'll have a military analyst to look at the significance of the incursion overnight, and we'll be live with the UN as well, talking about their operations, what's happening in Gaza. They're in Israel. They'll be joining us too later in the programme. So we're climbing there. Let's just show you the live shot we have of Gaza. We will be live in the Middle East shortly with our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, for all the very latest on the conflict. Let's take a look at some of the other stories, though, making the headlines here in the UK. Accommodation costs are using up almost all the average maintenance loan received by university students in England, it says student housing charity Unipol. In the last 2 years, the average student rent has gone up by more than 14%. Maintenance loans have risen by 5.2%. The government could face a judicial review after excluding some health workers from a one-off bonus. It was intended to recognise work carried out since the COVID pandemic, but thousands of outsourced staff, such as community nurses and physiotherapists, won't receive it. For the first time in years, the Remembrance poppy has undergone a change. The new flowers for the Royal British Legion's annual appeal are entirely plastic-free, and they can also be recycled. A picture there of the new poppy. More can be found on the website as well at bbc.com on all our top stories. You're live with BBC News. Let's take you straight to Jerusalem now. We can hand over to our colleague, the Chief International Correspondent of the BBC, Lise Doucet. Lise, hi.
Thank you, Lucy, and welcome back to Jerusalem. We're following all the developments in the Israel-Gaza war, day 20, and the Israeli military has been reporting that it carried out what it called a significant incursion into the Gaza Strip overnight. John Simpson, our World Affairs editor, thank you very much for joining us from Beirut as we continue our special coverage of the Israel-Gaza war. You're watching BBC News in the United Kingdom and around the world. Thank you for joining us from Jerusalem.
Hello there. Contrasting weather conditions continue across Europe. High pressure keeps things cold.
Hello there. Well, it's been a very wet October for some of us, not for all of us, but
where at the
especially
same
wet
time out
across
to the west
central and eastern areas of England.
Made so much richer by the people who live in them.
So unleash your spirit of adventure
and join us for a deeper understanding of the world.
The Travel Show. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
The Israeli military says it's carried out a targeted raid, sending tanks into Gaza to prepare for future operations. The UN has begun to significantly scale down its operations in Gaza because fuel has almost run out. And a major manhunt is underway in the US state of Maine for a gunman who has killed at least 16 people. The UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says reducing the risk of extinction posed by artificial intelligence should be a global priority, though people shouldn't lose sleep over it. Let's take you live now to the US state of Maine, to the town of Lewiston, a town in absolute shock right now because at least 16 people are feared to have been killed in shootings that took place on Wednesday night at 2 locations in Lewiston. So there is a lockdown there in that town, and the hunt for the gunman is very, very active right now. It's just a small city. This is one of the streets where we've seen a lot of police activity. In fact, we've just seen a police drone going up there, but only about 38,000 people, all on lockdown. People have been told to stay at home. Businesses are shut as well. We'll have more from Israel and Gaza very shortly. Let's just show you the live pictures that we have because we're keeping a close eye, obviously, on what is happening there. And the new figure we have from the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza is 7,000 people have been killed there since the 7th of October. And Lynn just really laying out some of the concerns on the ground in terms of the humanitarian issues, waterborne diseases really becoming a concern, and the desperate need for more fuel. It's really running low right across Gaza at the moment. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
BBC News, bringing you different stories from across the UK.
For generations, people in Wellingborough have walked through these lime trees. Campaigners want that to continue. In February, protests stopped contractors felling the trees to make way for an access road to the new Stanton Cross housing development. Around 16 were chopped down, around 45 were temporarily spared. Now campaigners have been told by a High Court judge their protest can go to a full judicial review.
It's time to vote for the BBC Women's Footballer of the Year 2023. And the global shortlist is out. The 5 finalists are Aitana Bonmati, Mary Earps,
The developers say they've paused work while the legal challenge takes place, but can't
Alexandra
comment until
Pop,
it's resolved. That's expected to be
Fridolina
next year,
Wolfer.
when
Your
campaigners
choice,
hope
your
these
champion.
schools
Go
will
to
still have
bbc.com/women's
a bright
football before
For more
voting
stories
closes on
from
the 3rd
across
of
the
November
UK,
at 9
head to the BBC
GMT.
News
Terms and
website.
privacy notice are online.
You're live with BBC News. So we've just been speaking to the UN about their concerns around the humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. Well, my colleague Lise Doucet has been speaking to Hussam Zomlot, who is head of the Palestinian mission to the UK, about the crisis in Gaza, and she asked what should happen next. Carrie Davies in Islamabad, it's good to have you with us here on BBC News.
Hello there. Well, it's been a very wet October for some of us, not for all of us, but especially wet across central and eastern areas of England.
Live from London, this is BBC News. The Israeli military says it carried out a targeted raid, sending tanks into Gaza to prepare for future operations.
We did engage, we did kill the enemy, and also seek out lookout positions that Hamas are still holding in the area, potentially evacuating and clearing mines and explosive devices.
The UN begins to scale down its operations in Gaza as fuel is running out, and the number of people killed passes 7,000.
We have no rescue teams. People are still alive and shouting. We need humanitarian en masse from all directions to elevate this unprecedented human suffering.
Major manhunt is underway in the US state of Maine for a gunman who has killed at least 16 people. And the UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says reducing the risk of extinction posed by artificial intelligence should be a global priority, though people shouldn't lose sleep over it. Hello, I'm Lucy Hockings. Welcome to BBC News Now. 3 hours of fast-moving news, interviews and reaction. It's less than 3 weeks since Hamas attacked southern Israel, killing more than 1,400 people. The number of people killed in Gaza has now passed 7,000. That's according to the Health Ministry in the Hamas-controlled Strip. Almost 3,000 of them are children. As Gaza reels from Israel's intense bombardment, the military says it's carried out a significant incursion there to attack Hamas positions. And it's released this video showing tanks and armoured bulldozers crossing the perimeter fence. An Israeli Defence Forces spokesperson telling the BBC soldiers carried out the tactical raid towards central Gaza to, in his words, prepare the battlefield for future operations. The Israeli military says the number of people confirmed to be held hostage in Gaza has now risen to 224 and warns that that number could rise. So far, 4 hostages are known to have been released. Meanwhile, the UN says their aid workers are significantly scaling down their operations in Gaza. Fuel reserves almost running out there. Israel says Hamas is storing enough fuel to run hospitals and water pumps for many days, but it's keeping it for its war-fighting capabilities. Magnus, thank you for taking the time to join us. Our thoughts are with your teams working on the ground there in the Gaza Strip. Thank you. We are keeping a close eye on everything that is happening. We'll be with Lise Doucette, who is in Jerusalem, very shortly, so stay with us for that. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. You're live with BBC News. Israelis are still struggling to come to terms with the horror of October the 7th. Many victims of the Hamas attack are yet to be identified because their bodies were so badly burned. And then there are those who were not murdered, young and old, taken hostage and still held in captivity in Gaza. Our correspondent Burak Davis has spoken to one family whose lives have been turned upside down. Bradley, thank you so much for updating us from Lewiston. As Bradley said, there will be a police press conference. We're expecting that in about 2 hours' time, and we hope to bring you some of that live here on BBC News. This is BBC News, the headlines. The Israeli military says it's carried out a targeted raid, sending tanks into Gaza to prepare for future operations. The UN begins to scale down its operations in Gaza as fuel runs out and the number killed passes 7,000. A major manhunt is underway in the US state of Maine after gunmen opened fire at a bowling alley and a bar, killing at least 16 people. Let's return our focus to the Middle East, where Gaza is reeling after almost 3 weeks of intense bombardment, which has now killed more than 7,000 people, according to the Hamas-controlled Health Ministry, including almost 3,000 children. In addition to its airstrike, the Israeli military says it's carried out a significant incursion into the besieged Strip to attack Hamas positions around the world and across the UK. This is BBC News. Pakistan has given a last warning to all immigrants in the country illegally to leave voluntarily before November the 1st, or they will be removed. They're including thousands of Afghans, and the first charter flight in months bringing Afghan refugees from Pakistan to the UK is due to leave today. These are thousands of people who risked their lives to work with or for the UK and Afghanistan and were promised UK visas, who have been stuck in Pakistan, some for over a year, along with their families. Let's hear from Carrie Davies, our correspondent in Islamabad. Back to the Gaza Strip, we've just seen what looks to be quite a big strike. You can see a lot of smoke in the air there. Israel not launching its expected ground invasion of Gaza yet. But what we have seen overnight, and our correspondents have confirmed this, is the Israeli army carrying out its biggest incursion so far into Gaza. The IDF releasing these pictures you can see here of tanks and bulldozers as well. And what the army has told us is that their targets included anti-tank missile launch posts, and they attacked those, and then troops returned to Israel. They said that there had been no Israeli casualties in this overnight raid, but they did hit numerous terrorist cells, as I mentioned, infrastructure and anti-tank missile launch posts. So these are the latest pictures from the IDF of that incursion overnight into Gaza. Good to have you with us here on BBC News. We'll have more coming up live from the Middle East in a moment.
As we head through Saturday night and into Sunday, so staying very settled.
When big names talk, they talk to the BBC.
Live from London, this is BBC News. The Israeli military carries out a targeted raid, sending tanks into Gaza to prepare for future operations.
We did engage, we did kill the enemy, and also seek out lookout positions that Hamas are still holding in the area, potentially evacuating and clearing mines and explosive devices.
The UN begins to scale down its work in Gaza as fuel runs out and the number of people killed passes 7,000.
We have no rescue teams. People are still alive and shouting. We need humanitarian en masse from all directions to elevate this unprecedented human suffering.
A major manhunt is underway in Maine after a gunman opens fire at a bowling alley and bar, killing at least 16 people. Hello, I'm Lucy Hockings. Welcome to BBC News Now. It's less than 3 weeks since Hamas attacked southern Israel, killing more than 1,400 people, and the death toll in Gaza continues to rise by hundreds each day. More than 7,000 people have now been killed there, according to the Health Ministry in the Hamas-controlled Strip. Almost 3,000 of them are children. Sophia Batista there, keeping an eye on things in Brussels, and we'll continue to keep you up to date from there, should we get that statement from those EU leaders. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines. University students in England are now spending almost all the money from their maintenance loans on accommodation, says the student housing charity Unipol. In the last 2 years, the average student rent has gone up by more than 14%. Maintenance loans have risen by 5.2%. The government could face a judicial review after excluding some health workers from a one-off bonus. It was intended to recognise work carried out since the COVID pandemic, but thousands of outsourced staff, such as community nurses and also physiotherapists, won't receive it. For the first time in years, the Remembrance Poppy has undergone a change. The new flowers for the Royal British Legion's annual appeal are entirely plastic-free, and they can also be recycled. So a change to the poppies for this year. You're live with BBC News. Let's turn to another big story coming out of the US. 16 people, possibly as many as 22, have been killed in a mass shooting. Around 50 others are reported to be injured. This happened in the city of Lewiston, which is in Maine, on the east coast of the US. Police saying the gunman targeted multiple locations, including a bowling alley, and is still at large. A massive manhunt is underway across the state for a 40-year-old US Army reservist who's believed to be suffering from mental health issues. People there have been told to stay at home. That was Rishi Sunak. Let's just show you the shot. You are now very familiar with, I'm sure, of the Gaza skyline because we can see some smoke rising in the air. There's been another strike there, but it comes after we've seen the Israeli Defence Forces saying they carried out a targeted raid overnight, one of the biggest so far in northern Gaza, using tanks. The Palestinian Health Ministry, operating in the West Bank, says 7,000 people have been killed there.
Hello there, let's take a look at the weather forecast for Europe as we head through the next few days. It's been a very wet October for some of us, not for all of us, but especially very unsettled conditions across the UK.
Come and have a seat.
Inspiring.
Of course, I'm not going to go easy on you. There are some really big questions we've got to try and get answers to this morning. But I'll be fair, and we just want to hear what you've got to say. So, shall we get on with it?
We're rolling.
Here we go. Join me to hear from the biggest names inside and outside politics.
Sunday with Laura Koonsberg. Sundays at 9 on BBC One
News,
and iPlayer.
The latest business news from across the globe. World Business Report.
Ford and the United Auto Workers Union reach a tentative deal to end a 6-week US strike. Still no agreement, though, at GM nor Stellantis. And back on track, the US economy grows at its fastest pace in nearly 2 years, squashing any fears of a recession. Well, hello and welcome to World Business Report with me, Lukwesa Burak. We're going to start in the United States, where after nearly 6 weeks of costly strike action, the American car giant Ford has reached a tentative deal with the United Auto Workers Union. Now, the agreement needs approval from union leaders, and it's also expected to provide around 25% wage hike over a 4-year period. The UAW has asked striking Ford workers to go back to work whilst that deal is ratified. The news comes ahead of Ford's quarterly results, which are due out later today. A bit of a military job for India there. Now, other news, and the European Central Bank has voted to leave interest rates unchanged at its latest meeting in Athens today. Now, that means that the ECB's deposit rate paid on commercial bank deposits remains at 4%. That's the highest since the euro was launched in 1999. The decision puts on hold a cycle of 10 interest rate rises. Eurozone inflation fell last month to 4.3%. Now, Chinese property developer Country Garden had a failure to pay credit event on October the 18th, paving the way for investors to receive a payout on default insurance. That is the latest from the World Business Report. I'll be back with more later.
BBC News, bringing you different stories from across the UK.
Rihanna Granger manages Bridgend Council's Safeguarding Hub, where social services, police, education and health come together to deal with calls in the future.
Linear television will die over time.
The Media Show. Business on BBC News. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Hello there, this is your update from the BBC Sports Centre. Newcastle and Italy midfielder Sandro Tonali has been banned for 10 months by the Italian Football Federation for breaching betting rules. Tonali joined Newcastle United from AC Milan in July for £55 million and is the second player to be sanctioned following the investigation. Our reporter Matt Graveling spoke to me earlier on. That is all the sport from us for now. Lucy will be back with more later on. We'll see you then.
See you soon, Gavin. Thank you. Let's return to a developing story in the US. At least 16 people, possibly as many as 22, have been killed in a mass shooting. Around 50 others are reported to be injured. It happened in the city of Lewiston in Maine, which is on the east coast of the US. The gunman targeted multiple locations, including a bowling alley, and is still at large. Let's take you back to the live picture that we have of Gaza right now. There has clearly been another airstrike there. We have not had the expected ground invasion of Gaza yet, but we did see quite an extensive overnight raid by the Israeli Defence Force. They called it targeted, and the word from them as they were speaking to the BBC said this raid was preparation for the next stages of combat. The IDF saying they eliminated terrorists, but there were no Israeli injuries. But the airstrikes, they're continuing, and this comes as the Hamas-run health ministry says 7,000 people have been killed since those airstrikes on Gaza began. So that's an increase of 500 killed since Wednesday. Israel saying that airstrikes hit 250 Hamas targets in the past 24 hours, and the UN desperately saying they need more fuel, more water, more aid, more supplies. They are short of all of those across the Gaza Strip. Do stay with us here on BBC News.
Hello there, let's take a look at the world weather forecast over the next day or so. We'll begin in North America, where central and eastern